Welcome to the Story Nerd Podcast, Hook Your Reader episode. This is where we give authors our professional advice about their query letters and their first 10 pages writing samples. I'm Kathleen Fox. I'm a literary agent at the Rights Factory in Toronto, and I'm a freelance editor with Fox Editorial.
And I'm Valerie Francis. I'm a writer and a story editor, and I teach women who are writing in all genres how stories work so they can finish their books faster and without frustration.
On today's episode, we're reviewing a murder mystery story from Linda Abbott. It takes a lot of guts for writers to send in their work and have it reviewed publicly, but it shows that they're willing to step out and bet on themselves. And we're happy to help. So Linda, thank you very much for sharing and for giving us all an opportunity to learn. Before we get started, we'd love it if you could help other writers find our show by leaving a rating and a review. For Apple Podcast listeners, you can do it right from your phone. Just go to the show's landing page and simply scroll to the bottom. That's all you got to do. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit like and subscribe so that you never miss an episode.
All right, I will get started with reading Linda's query letter. Dear Miss Fox, I am writing to you seeking representation for Mistaken Revenge, word count 70,000, a contemporary murder mystery. Is the first in a series featuring Detective Sloane Gillard. I am currently working on the second manuscript. Lauren, a 25-year-old photojournalist, discovers that her uncle, Father Scott, the parish priest of a small community, hasn't been seen for 3 days. Lauren is concerned because 3 days earlier, she witnessed a man threaten to kill her uncle if he didn't stay away from his wife. She and her father, her uncle's identical twin, hurry to the police to report her uncle missing. Due to personal experience, Lauren doesn't trust the police and makes her feelings known to Detective Sloane. Later in the day, Sloane is called to a murder scene and realizes the victim is the missing priest. Despite warnings to let the police handle the situation, Lauren takes it upon herself to investigate and learns that everything is not as it appears. A second murder victim, who has no apparent connection to Father Scott, unleashes secrets and heartaches for Lauren, which shatters her trust in family and friends. She knows she has a life-altering decision to make if she wants to attain peace and happiness. The story also delves into Detective Gillard's own demons and how he struggles to deal with them while performing his professional role as a detective. Fans of James Patterson will be intrigued by this murder mystery. I have received positive feedback from family and friends who have read the manuscript. Thank you for your time and consideration, Linda Abbott. All right, Kathleen, what are your thoughts about Linda's query letter?
First of all, it sounds like there is a premise under the surface. So I'll start with that. The first paragraph, it could just use some tightening. I'm seeking representation, or better yet, I'm excited to submit my 70,000 word contemporary murder mystery, Mistaken Revenge, a standalone with series potential. So that it tightens it up a little bit. And I would recommend just an overall tightening up of the plot paragraphs as well, like the whole query letter. The first paragraph also, it already dives into the plot paragraphs. So I would separate that. I would bring your comp section up to the introductory paragraph, and then I would keep your plot paragraph separate. So on the topic of comps, I'm wondering what specific element or theme in James Patterson's books are you comparing your story to? And also, James Patterson has been writing books for like decades. I don't know when the first one came out, but a long time. And so the comps are A, to set the tone and vibe of the story, but also B, for marketing purposes. So in that sense, it's important to select two comparable titles that have recently sold, like within the last 3 years or so, that have sold well and that are relevant to your story. So kind of like an X meets Y situation. And then listing what specific themes or elements you're comparing to. If there's a particular book by James Patterson, that would be good. I would say, like, I like to see titles. I like to see a title of a comp and the specific reason you're comping to meets this title and the specific reason. And if you're going to use an author's name that's big and has written a lot of books, I would say that would be okay for like a third kind of comp. It doesn't have to be like a specific title. We just know, like if you were to say Stephen King, for example, we all know what vibe he writes, right? So we just kind of know. But I would pair that with two specific titles from other authors. Um, and so I would bring that initial plot sentence down to the plot paragraph. And I would say something like 25-year-old photojournalist Lauren is doing this very normal thing in her life when she discovers that her uncle, the local parish's priest, has been missing for 3 days. So you're giving us who the protagonist is, you're giving us her age, what her norm is, and if not the inciting incident, then something that's leading to the inciting incident, along with a potential suspect. So curiosity is already raised. Yeah, in terms of plot paragraphs, quite a few questions came up for me, and they were not the kinds of questions that are born of curiosity. They were born of there not being enough specificity for me. What you want to have as an agent with a clear picture, so that they can like grasp what the premise is, where it's going. And so for me, I was wondering about things like what kinds of personal experience made her not trust the police. Like there's something there. We need to know what that is. What is compel and sorry, I'll just back up there for a second. If it's a spoiler, then we don't wanna know what it is, but we should at least know what kind of personal experience led her to be distrustful of the police. What was compelling Laura to investigate her uncle's murder instead of letting the police do it? So I know she doesn't trust them, but, like, is her uncle like her second father and she's very, very close to him? Like, what's compelling her to just take this on? And she's, never investigated a murder in her life. What kinds of secrets and heartaches are unleashed on Laura and make her not trust those that she loves? This is the most important one, I think, what kind of life altering decision does she have to make? What happens if she chooses A, and what happens if she chooses B? So you have to be very, very specific about this, especially because this affects what we know about her stakes. Right now, I really don't see any stakes here, so that's huge for me. I'm not sure what her ultimate goal is. Attaining peace and happiness. I'm so sorry to say it. It's just not a strong enough goal. Um, or motivation, right? So what is underneath that? So and also what took that away and what does she exactly need to do to get it back? Um, what is she risking by investigating? What is she risking by letting the police do it? Again, what happens if she decides A? What happens if she decides B? So there's just not quite enough there for me to fully grasp what is happening and why it matters. Um, And there's two things about the final line of the plot paragraph. One, I always recommend avoiding disconnecting phrases like the story also delves into, or we meet the protagonist when, or then we discover. Like those, it's very disconnecting for the reader. Like, don't remind me that I'm being told about a story. Just put me into the story. Um, and two, is this a dual POV story? Um, this line, the last line there, tells me that it probably is. Otherwise, why are we delving into Detective Gillard's demons and his role as a detective? If this is a dual POV story, we need to know his motivations and his goals and conflicts and stakes just as much as we need to know Lauren's. And then we need to see how those conflicts and stakes intertwine. Um, and how the story forces them into whatever decisions they have to make, how they affect each other's growth, etc. Um, and you also referred to him as Detective Sloan Gillard, Detective Sloan, and Detective Gillard. So there's four different names for one character. So whatever name he is being referred to the most in the story, like if it's Sloan, just use Sloan in the query letter so that avoids any confusion there. Um, and that brings me to another point too. There are about 100 words or so that you can add into this query, to make sure that it's more specific and more about, like, if it is a dual POV story, then more about Detective Gillard. My first thought when I opened this query to begin with, before I even started reading, was, "It's too short." and I knew that I wouldn't get enough details for me to be able to fully grasp what's going on. Um, the final line that you say, it's sort of like in your bio paragraph that your family and friends have read it and given you positive feedback. Unfortunately, this tells me that it is probably not ready for agents' eyes. Agents expect manuscripts to receive that. Sorry, agents expect the manuscripts they receive queries for to be as close to perfect as possible, as polished as you could possibly make them. And I know that we talk about, writing is you do it by yourself. You really don't though. It does take a community to help each other get to those levels where you're getting interest from agents. And that means that you are getting beta readers to give you feedback on certain things. So you're getting critique partners, writers who understand the writing process. They're giving you that feedback so that you can improve your writing skills. And as much as we all love our friends and family, and as much as they love us, unless they're professional writers or authors, right? They're just not going to give you the kind of feedback that you need to make those improvements to your story. And every writer needs to make improvements. It's how it works. You can't write a perfect story the first time around. And your friends and family are more likely to be like, oh my God, I love the story. It's so great. I want to see this in the bookstores. Um, and less likely to be like, I like this, but here's what I think needs some work, right? Like friends and family aren't going to want to hurt your feelings. Um, so yeah, I would remove that line altogether because that tells me that the manuscript is not going to be ready. I probably won't even get to the pages. Um, and I would strongly recommend that you get some beta readers, critique partners, professional editing if that's something you want to do, um, to help you make the improvements you need to elevate the manuscript so that it is ready for querying.
Your friends and family have a really important job to play, really important role to play for us. They're our cheerleaders. So when we are feeling discouraged and like we can't go on, they're there to give us a hug and say, you can do it. That's their job. And it's really, really important. It's not their job to go into the manuscript and say, this is the part I don't understand, or because just like you said, they don't want to hurt our feelings. And most friends and family don't really want to talk about it in that detail. They just want to know that you're happy and that you're following your passion, and that's what they want to know. Okay, Linda. First, I have to say this is a fabulous genre choice. I mean, mysteries are one of my all-time favorites, and they're super popular right now. So there are actually a lot of agents looking for them. Now, to make your query catch an agent's eye, I do have some recommendations. And actually, they're very similar to what Kathleen just said, which is good news for you because it's not a thousand things you need to fix. It's we're lumping them because if both of us are noticing the same thing, that means you need to pay more attention to it. So the first thing that I would say is that you need to be super clear about who the protagonist is. So in the query letter, you say that this is the first in a series featuring Detective Sloane Gillard. Now, that means Gillard is the protagonist. However, most of the information in the query letter talks about Lauren as the protagonist. So, in a murder mystery, the main character is the person who is doing the investigating. This book, it seems to be a cozy mystery. You call it a contemporary murder mystery, but it feels like a cozy. And they often feature amateur sleuths, so no problem there at all. It could be a professional investigator of some sort, but could also just as easily be an amateur sleuth. When there is an amateur sleuth, there can also be a police officer or detective. But in that case, if the amateur sleuth is the protagonist, then the police officer or detective is a secondary character. And they can function as an ally or even as an antagonist to the main character. So, my question is the same as Kathleen's. Is this a dual POV story with two characters investigating the murders separately? Or, which means like two storylines happening here? Or is there like one omniscient narrator following two totally separate characters with totally separate plot lines that somehow come together at the end? And I'm asking that because the opening pages are written in third person omniscient. So I from the query letter and the opening pages, I'm not clear what's happening there. So Linda has also written that, quote, a second murder victim who has no apparent connection to Father Scott unleashes secrets and heartaches for Lauren, which shatters her trust in family and friends. Okay, I don't know what that means. Does the person, the murder victim, i- does that person reveal Lauren's secrets before he or she was killed? And what kind of secret? What kind of heartache? Why does it shatter her trust in family and friends? Now, obviously, just like Kathleen said, you're not going to spoil the plot in the query letter. But if you want to hook the reader, you need to give some context. Specificity, and Kathleen, you just used this word, specificity. That's what you're looking for. So, for example, is the secret about Lauren? We don't even know that. Is it a secret about Father Scott and his past? Like, that kind of thing. Point us in a direction. Um, Linda also wrote that Lauren, quote, knows she has a life altering decision to make if she wants to attain peace and happiness. Again, same question Kathleen just asked. What is the life altering decision? And attaining peace and happiness, again, just like Kathleen said, um, it can't be her goal or her objective for this particular book because this is a murder mystery. And if she is the protagonist, her goal, her object of desire is to find out who done it. Attaining peace and happiness is irrelevant. The reader does not care whether Lauren attains peace and happiness. The reader only cares who killed Father Scott, who kills the other person. Is it the same killer or different killers? What was the means, motive, and opportunity? Mysteries are literary puzzles, especially cozy mysteries are literary puzzles. And that's all they care about. um, One follow up question that I had, Kathleen, that I'm curious about is that in the query letter, Linda has not included an author bio paragraph. So, does this matter? If so, why? If not, why not?
I like to see I like to see an author bio because I wanna know a little bit about the person behind the story, right? So, I wouldn't necessarily like, I wouldn't if I really, really loved the query and I was excited to get to the pages, that wouldn't deter me. Like, I wouldn't say like, "Oh, they didn't include a bio? Forget this. I'm not even gonna go there." Like, that's not it's just nice to include. It is very typical to see. It's not typical to see one without one, and it just lets us know, do you have any writing credentials? If you don't, that's totally fine. You don't have to have any writing credentials to write a book. But it's nice to know if you do, and it's just nice to know, just a little bit about, who this person is. What's your life like outside of writing? What hobbies do you do? What do you do for a living? Where are you located? Like that kind of stuff. Anything that you feel comfortable sharing with an agent.
All right. Shall we move on to the writing sample pages?
Mhm.
All right, I'll start.
Yeah.
So one of the conventions of a cozy mystery, which, like I said, this seems to be, is that there is a community of characters that the reader gets to know and love over time, especially if we're looking at a series or a book with serious potential. Just think of, St. Mary Mead or Cabot Cove or Three Pines. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on, right? So I think Linda's done a really good job here with creating Moon Harbor and populating it with characters that we would like to spend time with. I mean, Mr. Timmons seems like just a sweet old man. He's described as an elderly man with a salt and pepper cap. And then there's Sheila Duncan, and she's technically a housekeeper, but she's much more than an employee, it seems, right? She's also kind of like a matron or a family member. So so I liked the community that Linda was creating. So she's definitely got something here to work with. But, and you know there's gonna be a but. I'm wondering if Linda is starting her book in the right place. Now, I don't know if she is or isn't, because in order to answer that question, I'd have to read the whole manuscript, which I haven't done. But let me explain to you why my spidey senses are tingling here. This is a murder mystery with, it seems, two protagonists and definitely two victims. Yet the book opens with a showing of photos from Lauren's childhood. Now, the query describes Lauren as a photojournalist. For that to be highlighted in the query, it must be important, right? Yet here we're told that she's chosen 16 photos of her childhood as her first endeavor into the art world. Now, in a murder mystery, the murder has to happen as soon as possible. Don't pass go, don't collect $200, just get the murder on the page as quickly as you can. And this is not negotiable. Why? Because the discovery of the dead body is the inciting incident. Someone who loves murder mysteries has picked up the murder mystery because they want to solve a mystery or do their darndest to try and solve the mystery before the solution is revealed. So it is really common for mysteries to open with the victim's body being discovered. And that has to be on the page. We can't find out that there was a body discovered before the book opens or somehow off the page. It's got to be on the page, the discovery of the dead body. And if it's not there in the first couple of pages, there's got to be a really good reason for it. The absolute latest it can happen is chapter 5, although boy, that feels really late. Like I read an Anthony Horowitz book. I think it was one of the Hawthorne books. It was the one that involved the theater and the acting troupe. And the dead body is discovered in chapter 5. And even though I know how this genre works, I read so many of them, I just love these. I knew what he was doing. I could see the craft unfolding on the page. And even though I have read so many Anthony Horowitz books and I completely trust him, I know I'm in safe hands. I know he's going to deliver the goods. Even with all of that, chapter 5, it just felt like a really long time. I really felt, come on, let's get moving. Let's get moving. Even though I could see him introducing the big cast, which is, one of the Agatha Christie staples. He was doing that and like, okay, these are all my suspects here. I could see all that happening. I still wanted to get to the murder because the story doesn't start until the murder happens. So technically you can do it in chapter 5. I would recommend no later than chapter 3. Better yet, chapter 1. Because if the mystery reader, if they don't get the murder, and if you don't have a real diehard fan base, I doubt they're going to stay with you that long. I really do. Now, before I move on, there's just a couple of logic notes here that I want to touch on. So first of all, there's a reference to 16 photos that Lauren is showing in her, in the gallery. And then a couple of line later, it says that there would be 7 photos on each wall. So that's 14 photos, not 16 photos. And also, if Lauren wants to break into the art world, presumably as a photographer, since she is a photojournalist, which was highlighted in the query letter, why is she giving a showing of photos that she has not taken? Like these photos have been taken by her uncle and her father, and they're of her when she was a little girl. And then there's a reference to Lauren having paint on her hands. Like from what? These are photos, they're not paintings. Now, it might seem like I'm being awfully fussy here or awfully critical, but I'm actually not. This is a murder mystery. It is a genre that invites readers to read very carefully. So authors have to be just unbelievably precise at every single stage in the narrative. Readers will not tolerate problems with story logic in a murder mystery. They just won't. They're reading very closely because they're looking for clues and red herrings. And if you make story logic's mistakes, they are going to find them. And what that means is that they're going to lose confidence in you as a storyteller. And that means they're going to stop reading. So story logic is always really important. But in a murder mystery where you are writing for people who read very closely, you got to be really diligent. And this sort of stuff pops up in first drafts all the time. Don't worry about it in a first draft. All kinds of weirdness happens in a first draft. The goal of the first draft is just to exist. But when you go back and start working on subsequent drafts, this is the kind of thing you need to be mindful of. And if you need to keep notes to yourself about all these details, which you probably will, because there's lots of details in a murder mystery intentionally, right? So that you bury the real clues with all the other misdirections. Really go over it with a fine tooth comb and make sure that these sorts of things don't creep in there. Okay, also, we have Mark Zanders. He is the town drunk. He is too obvious as a red herring. Now, he's the one who threatens to kill Father Scott in front of a whole room full of people. Now, we're used to seeing this kind of thing in, murder mysteries of old, right? I am rewatching Murder She Wrote right now. And while I will not have a bad word said about um, Angela Lansbury and Murder She Wrote, holy smokes, the plot holes are painful. I still love it. I still love it. There was in one episode, the murderer actually had a great big mustache that he was twirling throughout the whole episode. Kathleen, it's hilarious. It's hilarious. I mean, I still love the show. But, murder mysteries from, that are older or from yesteryear, we're going to see these types of things. But a murder mystery written today, this sort of thing is not going to fly because audiences are too sophisticated. Like, they have read all of the murder mysteries uh, up to today, so they can see these things coming a mile off. We know that Mark is not going to be the killer. Or should I say, Mark had better not be the killer, because that's a whole other problem that I don't have time to go into right now. So Mark is not going to be the killer. So what is the point in wasting the reader's time and, more importantly, wasting those precious opening pages by spending so much time introducing him and describing him and all that kind of stuff? Like, it's not adding to the story, and I think it's a missed opportunity is what I'm saying. Now, the caveat there is if you're going to introduce Mark as a potential suspect, there is a way of doing that. And there's a whole strategy around that. Again, that's outside of the scope of what we're talking about today. So I'll just keep going. Um, in terms of the line writing, Linda, I think this has been overwritten. And the solution to overwriting is so simple. And again, this is not something you're going to even want to waste time on in a first draft. Like, just write the first draft. Let it be as ugly as it needs to be. Just get to the end. You can fix all of the stuff in the next round, okay? In the next round of edits. But when you are ready to do the line edit, all you do is you get a couple of different color highlighters. And in one round, you just read the whole manuscript and you highlight all the adjectives. And in the next one, you highlight with another color pen all of the adverbs. And then you take another color pen and you go through and you highlight all the exposition. Because then, if your adjectives are in yellow, wow, they really jump off the page. And you get a chance then to say, all right, what does the reader need to know? Do they need to know all of the characters' hair color and eye color? Maybe. That might be really important to your story. But that means that they don't need to know other stuff. So you can weed out what they don't need to know. And the other thing you're going to ask is, if this is crucial information for the reader, do they need to know it now? Because the reader is on a need to know basis, especially in a murder mystery, because it's all clues. You don't tell them anything they don't need to know until they need to know it. And then you tell it to them in a way that is, I call it invisible, which means they're getting information and they don't even see that they are getting it. That is line writing skills, at the level of describing effectively, using exposition effectively. Um, and this highlighter trick, it sounds laborious, and I know everyone listening to this is going to say, I'm not doing that. There's no way it's going to take too much time. even if you just take your first 5 chapters and do it, it is such an eye opener as an exercise. Um, it's really, really worth the time. Trust me. Just trust me on this one. Okay, and all that said, the biggest area that I think, Linda should focus on, is learning to write a scene that works and that includes a lot of tension. So chapter 1 does open with, some tension for sure. There's a woman alone in a building, and outside, there's a staggeringly drunk man approaching. That's a threat, right? But at the top of page 3, he just wanders away, and there's no threat at all. Like, the threat has gone, and with it, all of the tension has just drained right out of the narrative. If there is no tension in your story, you will lose your reader. That's a guarantee for all of us writing in any genre. Tension creates attention. If there's no tension in your narrative, you will lose your reader. In order to have tension, you need conflict. And there really isn't any conflict in any of these opening pages. So Lauren is showing photographs of her childhood that other people took, and all of the characters in the community, they're all thrilled for her. They're all really happy for her. They all want her to succeed. On page 9, Mark Zanders re enters the story and he threatens Father Scott. So, yes, absolutely, there's conflict there. But it has nothing to do with Lauren, our protagonist, because Sloane is not even mentioned, right? So, Lauren is the only protagonist we have. And she is a passive bystander here to the action. And in the last episode that we did, we also talked about a protagonist who was quite passive and the impact that that had on the opening pages. So if you haven't heard that episode, go back and listen to it. Um, so, Linda, if you focus on learning to write working scenes, you'll naturally have tension and conflict on the page, and that will, eh, by default, engage your reader more, and you're much more likely to keep their attention into chapter 2 and beyond. Okay, so Kathleen, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, Valerie. There's I do think that there's tension, but it's not directly related to Lauren. And yeah, she's kind of standing there watching it all unfold. Um, so yeah, so I do agree with everything you just said. My overall thoughts on the opening pages are that I do think there's a story here. I think there's a premise under the surface, which I think I said with the query letter. I think we seem to be learning more about everybody else than we are about the protagonist. So, like in the very first paragraph, I feel like I already know her uncle better than I know Lauren. Um, we've gotten some location details in the opening paragraph, some scenery, the expectation that Lauren will see her uncle, and then she's disappointed when it's not him. But I don't feel completely grounded. I don't know what window she's looking out from, right? I don't know exactly what is like like why is she waiting for him? Why is it disappointing? Like what does she want to talk with him about? Why does she seem anxious or worried? It seems that the opening page is more focused on like the scenery than the information that should be hidden in that narration or like organically coming through in the narration. So it would be good, for example, to know precisely what information is she waiting to receive from her uncle, and why she's worried that he hasn't shown up yet. Um, Something intriguing that compels the reader to get to that second page. To me, Lauren doesn't feel like a super strong, confident, bold character. You use the word passive. I think she is a very passive character as she stands right now. And that could be intentional. Maybe there's like this massive arc that we see. Um, but she seems very unsure of herself, unsure of others. I don't really know yet. It's hard to put my finger on it, but I think there is room for her to improve as a character on the page, like improve the strength of her voice on the page. We do see a goal for Lauren, which is good. By page 4, we know that something is important to her. My mind is going, okay, cool. I wonder what's going to happen to destroy this for her and how she's going to get around it. Um, but again, like Valerie, you said, it doesn't really like, she's a photojournalist, and she's showing all of these pictures of her childhood that other people took. So I don't really understand that goal. Like, she wants it to be successful. I just don't understand the goal there. Um, Natural sounding dialogue and natural narrative, like, so in example, for example, the dialogue, there's a lot of names being used frequently, I found. In most conversation, we don't refer to each other using our names. So we might say like, "Oh, hi Valerie, how are you?" or something like that, but then that's generally it. Like, we don't often say each other's names in casual conversation. Um, so it I think the dialogue could be made to feel more natural if there was less frequent use of their names. Really, when you're writing a book, the only time you need to say the name is when you need it to be clear to the reader who's talking or who's being talked to, to introduce them. By page 8, I'm wondering if there is some flirting going on between her uncle and Sheila. And so then I start to wonder, okay, is Sheila the the wife that's referred to in the query letter? Um, So, by the time we get to the end of the first 10 pages, it becomes clear that Mark, the person that she saw at the beginning, is, the one that was making her feel unsafe and hanging around and drunk and whatnot, is the same guy that comes into the scene later at the end of the 10th page, or, the ninth or 10th page. So I'm wondering if Sheila is Mark's wife, but unless I miss something, I don't think that that's clear in the pages. Um, So, yeah, there might be some flirting happening between Father Scott and Sheila, and then Mark comes in. He's mad about whatever is going on between them. I wonder what happened, and I'm wondering what Lauren is thinking about all this. Um, I think because Lauren witnessed this person earlier, this Mark person, and he's the one that's coming in, assuming it's the same Mark, she should think, "Oh, there's the same guy I saw before." Like, I didn't see any of that there, like anything clear. And yeah, like, Sheila gets involved, but it's not like she's saying, like, "I'm gonna call the cops," or whatnot, like, "You can't be in here doing this." But there's nothing super, super clear and strong that points to her being Mark's wife. I'm pretty sure that's what it is, but I think there just needs to be some clarity there. So yeah, I think there's room for improvement on clarity, to give Lauren a stronger voice on the page. Um, yeah, just to be yeah, I think those are the top 2 areas for me.
Okay. I think for Linda, the biggest lever that she can pull here with respect to her opening pages is to consider opening the story with the discovery of the dead body scene. Because my spidey senses are tingling. I really am wondering if this story is starting in the right place. So even if you do this as a writing exercise, just to see how it would impact the rest of the story, wherever the first dead body is, her uncle, Father Scott, wherever his body is found, whatever chapter that is, make that chapter 1 and um, see what that does to your story. I bet it's gonna strengthen the story, and it's gonna create a narrative that is more compelling. Good luck.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is room to tighten things up and to make things, like, stronger, and so in that case, some of these things could be pared down, and that means, like, we could get this background scene where we see how they interact and see how Mark comes in and whatever, but by the end of that first chapter, her uncle's body is found. I know he goes missing. So maybe that's it. But yeah, I agree. Like, you do have to get to the dead body as quickly as possible, because everybody knows in a murder mystery, that's the main event, right? You want to know who done it, why, how, etc. Um, So yeah, I would also say add some plot details to the query letter. You do have some room to play with there. So make sure you use that space wisely, make everything specific and clear. Focus on giving Laura a stronger voice as well, adding some clarity to the pages and just some tightening of the line level writing. Yeah, and making that dialogue and even the narrative sound stronger and kind of more natural and confident. All right. So that, I think, wraps it up for this week. If you want us to look at your work, visit storynerd.ca for all the details about how to submit. To support the show, please leave us a rating and review and tell your writer friends about us. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. To get copies of query letters and writing samples we feature on the show, join Valerie's Inner Circle at valeriefrancis.ca/inner circle. To find out more about my agent wish list or what services I offer as an editor, you can visit KathleenFoxAgent.com and FoxEditorial.com. And remember, Fox has 2 X's. And remember, story theory does not have to be difficult. It is a tool to help you write more, not less. So take it one step at a time and have fun.